Welcome back to Joy Recaps. Movies Stories Recapped here. Today, I'm going to recap a horror movie from 2020 called Anything for Jackson. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. In their home, an elderly couple is seen having a casual conversation. They're wondering if a woman has already arrived when they hear her outside and follow her. They are suddenly seen dragging a woman inside the house, while the wife says mind the baby and hits the woman on the head. As the wife closes the front door, the husband takes the woman upstairs in the elevator. A child's hand is touching the woman's face as she is gauged. She is startled awake when she notices a child greeting her. When the husband joins them, the wife announces that she is awake and introduces herself as Audrey and him as Henry. She tells Shannon that they decided this was the best way for her to go missing. Audrey assures her that they will not harm her or her child before dispatching Henry to perform the test. He's outside, and as the woman inside begins to scream, he calls his wife and informs her that nothing can be heard outside. Shannon inquires as to what they expect from her, and Audrey responds that they must return their grandson. When she asks if the boy in the room is her grandson, the old woman is surprised because he is no longer alive. Audrey plays music in the room, claiming Jackson enjoys music and leaving her alone with him. Audrey informs Henry that Jackson approached the woman, which makes him happy. He leaves for work and runs into Rory on his way out. Audrey returns to the room, bringing vitamins for the woman and going through her belongings, pulling her phone and some pills from her pocket. The woman grabs the phone when Audrey returns to the room after she leaves for a moment to get her glasses. She unlocks her phone and logs onto social media, where she messages a man who has agreed to meet her later that day. Audrey calls Henry at work to let him know it's finished. His assistant inquires about Shannon, who was his patient, and whether she will be returning soon, given that she is approaching her due date. He lies his way out of trouble. In a flashback, the old couple is seen with an ancient book, preparing to resurrect a raven. Audrey chants an incantation, and the raven returns. Henry doesn't agree with what she's doing, but she claims she only needed proof that the book was genuine. Back in the present, the two of them walk to a community center to keep up appearances, where they meet Ian. He tells them he couldn't find the book they already have, and Audrey is upset because he might tell someone. They enter a Satanist gathering. The main priestess begins the prayer to Satan as everyone puts on their robes and lights black candles. In another flashback, as Shannon's doctor, Henry informs her that she is pregnant. She's not happy about it, especially since she doesn't even know what the father's name is. While attempting to calm her, he texts his wife that he has found the right one and takes a picture of Shannon for her. The same image can be seen on the wall of her sleeping quarters. She coughs up blood and awakens to find the couple preparing the room for a Satanist ceremony. She begs them not to do it because they are already praying to Satan and inviting Satan into their home. When Shannon begins convulsing, they both cut their hands to offer their blood and spill it onto a heart. They pray in Latin as everything in the room comes to life, and they finally see Jackson. He points to the woman while Audrey continues to read, and then he vanishes. A demon appears for a few moments next to Shannon, and when it leaves, the couple checks on her and hears the baby's heartbeat. Audrey believes it is Jackson's heartbeat, but Henry is skeptical. The next morning, Henry wakes up without Audrey by his side. He looks over to the bathroom and sees a woman flossing her teeth while he continues to speak to her, thinking it's Audrey. When his wife calls him, he realizes that the woman in the bathroom is not Audrey. She doesn't stop flossing her teeth, and they continue to fall to the ground. She takes a step toward Henry. Suddenly, Audrey enters the room, and the woman vanishes. Later, he is working in his office when a police officer arrives. Detective Bellows informs him that Shannon is missing and that she is retracing her steps. Henry lies that she canceled her appointment, but his assistant reminds him of the previous lie he told her, that he saw her walking by his house the day she disappeared. His shenanigans do not fool the detective. He calls Audrey and tells her what happened, but she is not pleased that he changed the plan. There's a knock at the door, and she goes to answer it. On the other side, there's a ghost trick or treating. Audrey dismisses the ghost and shuts the door, but another knock comes. When she opens the back door, the ghost appears. As soon as she shuts that door, the ghost knocks on another door inside the house. She walks upstairs to call Henry, but she hears running, and when she looks down, it's the little ghost. She finally calls Henry and tells him what is going on, and he tells her to give the ghost her soul. She pursues the ghost to the elevator, but it emerges transformed into a massive version of itself. Shannon later asks Audrey why she was screaming earlier, and she responds that her daughter had come to see her. She avoids answering the question about her daughter. Shannon is left alone in the room and attempts to flee, but as she reaches for one of her restraints, she notices a man suffocating next to her bed. He stands up, walks around the room, then notices her and crawls on top of her, biting into her pregnant belly as she screams for Audrey. She's at the door, unable to open it, and when she does, the suffocating ghost rushes toward her. Suddenly, Henry appears, putting an end to the ghostly manifestation. As the couple prepares for bed, Henry assures Shannon that he stitched her up and that she will be fine. Audrey has no idea what they did and is wondering if they made a mistake. Henry meets Shannon outside his house in a flashback. She is no longer afraid to be a mother. Back in the present, Rory reappears, and Henry goes to greet him while Audrey prepares to sedate Shannon. Outside, the two men converse, but the man insists on cleaning his driveway. As Audrey and Henry argue inside, he starts the machine in front of the house. She is concerned that they performed the ritual incorrectly and that Jackson is not present. Rory calls out to them from the front yard, saying that they did everything correctly and that Jackson is on his way back to them, then suddenly puts his head inside the machine. Audrey later enters the room to clean Shannon up. She takes off the restraints and wraps the handcuffs in a cozy. Shannon inquires if they intend to kill her once they have the baby, but Audrey responds that their rule was not to harm her. The door to the room opens as they speak, and Audrey tells her that she reminds her of her daughter. She was in the same accident as Jackson, but she did not die immediately. She committed suicide in the house's elevator. Meanwhile, Henry is in the woods burying Rory when his phone rings. It's the detective following up with him, asking to see him. He attempts to elicit information from her, but she avoids his questions. She promises to meet him at his house in an hour. Back in the room, Shannon begs Audrey to let her be Jackson's mother alongside them, to care for him after they die. She promises to do whatever they want. When there's a knock on the door, Audrey gags her once more and walks out, locking the door behind her, but the door unlocks on its own. Henry rushes home, but the detective has already arrived. Audrey is handcuffed next to her as she waits for him inside Shannon's room. As Shannon begs her to let her out, she tells him to get down on his knees, but the detective turns to her and calmly kills herself. Audrey is freed from her cuffs, and the detective's body is removed from the room. Henry buries her in the same plot where Rory is buried. Audrey tries to tell him about Shannon's request the next day, but there's a knock on the door. Ian has asked for the book. They show him the book and Henry tells him how he obtained it. Audrey asks if he can read it, to which he responds that it has been written in various languages and dialects and is possibly the world's oldest book. When they inquire about the invocation spell, he instructs them to show him exactly what they did when they cast it. When they do, he says that every ghost in purgatory will be looking for a host once the door to purgatory is open. He inquires about the host they used, and they transport him to Shannon. They ask Ian if Jackson is in there, and he says no, but he could be. They must complete the ceremony by sacrificing the mother. Ian says he can perform the ceremony if they let him keep the book and give him $10,000. He will perform the ceremony the next day, but they must surround Shannon and themselves with rock salt to keep the other ghosts at bay. That night, both Henry and Audrey are in the room with Shannon, adding salt to the wound. Shannon tells Henry about her baby plan, but he says she can't win a moral debate with him because he's already made a deal with the devil. He informs her that Audrey was driving the car when Jackson died, but she is unable to recall. Henry is handling everything for her. Suddenly, the ghost of the detective enters and kills herself again. Ian is reading a book in his basement when his mother summons him for lunch. He grabs his belongings and storms out. When he arrives at the house, the detective appears behind him as he walks into the bedroom. The others aren't surprised any longer, claiming she's been doing it all night. Ian begins right away, instructing the couple on what to read. The detective enters once more. He claims that salt only slows them down, whereas a sacrifice stops them. As the detective returns, Ian continues with the instructions, but this time she does not shoot herself. He and Henry go outside, and he measures the locations of various objects around the house. Without hesitation, he tells Henry that he is the one who must murder the mother, because if he hesitates, they will all perish. Audrey is drawing a pentagram in the room while Shannon tries to distract her. Audrey goes out to get some food after she requests it. Shannon breaks free from her restraints and pours water on herself, pretending to be pregnant. Audrey enters and requests Henry. Shannon is getting ready as the two men walk in. As he walks inside, Ian disturbs the salt. He immediately begins reading from the book, as Audrey is concerned about Jackson's presence and Henry is receiving messages from their cult's priestess. The pentagram begins to shine, and Ian declares that it is functional. When Henry answers the phone, it's the priestess telling him that Ian murdered his mother and drew symbols on his house. He informs Audrey that something is wrong with Ian, but encourages him to continue. Shannon breaks free from her restraints and grabs Audrey, threatening to cut her throat if Henry doesn't undo her legs. Audrey and Ian both warn him not to do it, but Henry continues to do it, and Ian murders Audrey, claiming that a mother is a mother. He splatters blood on Henry and continues the ceremony while Shannon struggles to free herself from the restraints and Audrey dies in Henry's arms. Shannon stabs Ian, and a giggling ghost enters and grabs him, carrying him away. As Shannon tries to flee, he can be heard screaming in the other room. The suffocating ghost appears behind her and moves toward her. Henry tells her to leave and forgives them. At that point, something begins to emerge from Audrey's body, frightening the other ghost. The same thing happens to Henry, and Shannon flees. She sees the giggling ghost and flees, followed by the other two, who are about to open the door when the giant ghost appears outside. She slams the door shut. Meanwhile, a creature has risen from the ashes of Audrey and Henry. Shannon is in the kitchen when she notices the keys, but the detective appears and walks up to her, promising to protect her. The creature exits the bedroom. Shannon walks out of the house, notices Rory, but ignores him. She looks up to see Jackson in the window, about to be taken away. Shannon takes off, but as she drives through the woods, she notices something on the road. She notices it's a pregnant woman after a second look. She looks down and notices blood on her stomach.